So there was this announcement recently that involved a bunch of mysterious blueprints of what looks like a New York Central steam engine, all hinting towards a massive announcement in the coming days. Although some people initially suspected the restoration of New York Central Mowhawk number 3001, this teaser seemed a bit unusual, especially since what little of the blueprints were visible could have also hinted towards a J3 Hudson. And unprecedentedly, several other railway preservation groups in the country were hinting towards the same event, which raised some hopes about several steam agencies coming together to finally new build the famous J-class Hudson. Eventually, when it was revealed that the Railroad Museum strongly suggested simply restoring Mowhawk 3001 instead of new building a Hudson, the part of me that was secretly wishing for a Hudson new build was somewhat disappointed. So I left a comment on the official announcement video asking if anyone else thought the announcement was about new building a Hudson instead of restoring the Mowhawk. To which the Fort Wayne Historic Society replied within 5 minutes, where I got epically owned and ratioed. Not wanting to take the L, I replied that I liked the L veneers on Penn CK4s, and I wished the museum the best of luck on restoring the Mowhawk, as it would be great to see some central steam running once again. I then started to think how, despite technically not being a Hudson, the Mowhawk is the closest thing we have to a NYC Hudson, and how many people might appreciate 3001 just for that. It was likely also the reason why the same engine was considered for Ross Rollins' proposed 21st Century Limited with C0614, which also included several display cars about the achievements of the past century, as well as new innovations for the next century. And that's when it hit me. Among the many displays proposed for this massive excursion run was a new-built cab control car powered by a pair of 4,000 horsepower GE diesel engines, all streamlined in custom cowling that makes the H3000 look like a plastic toy by comparison. And considering that this was a cancelled one-off GE locomotive, this means that I forgot to include this massive GE engine / cab car that would have easily been the most unique and ambitious of any engine mentioned in the recently uploaded episode of Unbuilt focusing on GE, if not the series itself. What made this worse is that I simply couldn't make a video on the 21st Century Limited since I already mentioned it in the American Railroad Iceberg back in 2021 with Seaboard Railfan. To put it very lightly, my reaction to realizing this devastating truth was something in the likes of, seeing how massive this one-off railcar was, simply writing all of this in a community post wouldn't do it justice. So that's why I decided to include a little segment of this unbuilt GE engine right here, right now, as if it were initially included in the original episode of Unbuilt. Although not a high-speed train set, GE would help design one more one-of-a-kind railcar for something that was somewhat passenger-related, as General Electric was tasked with designing a cab control car with a futuristic streamlined steam locomotive-esque design that included a mock cab for visitors to walk through in addition to the real cab at the lower level. A pair of 4,000 horsepower GE engines powered the machine, one in the cab and one in the tender, thus resulting in a whopping 8,000 combined horsepower with 2 cabs and supposedly an observation deck, supposedly capable of operating at high speeds while carrying 84 cars, and possibly making this entry a high-speed train, according to an article from Washington Rail News. Such an unearthly design was created solely as extra excursion power and a rolling exhibit for the 21st Century Limited, a proposed excursion train led by Ross Rollins, in which C0614 and NYC 3001 would lead a number of display cars showcasing the various achievements in the 20th century across the US and possibly even Europe and Asia, similar to that in the American Freedom Train, as this massive railcar was numbered 2000 and was fittingly named the Millennium Machine. Instead of Cesar Vergara, the Millennium Mach 1, as it was also known, was designed by Michael Berardesco, while GE was selected to provide what would essentially be 2-9s under a massive cowl frame, as GE was the only sponsor who signed up for the event that was also a locomotive builder. Although Chrysler is also listed on the engine as being a sponsor for the Millennium Machine, although it is unlikely that they would have contributed to any of its internal components. But despite the massive scope of such an excursion run, even with its initial proposal back in 1991, there surprisingly wasn't enough time to coordinate all of the proposed stops and to construct all of the exhibits, let alone the Millennium Machine, before the actual turn of the century, as the only equipment to be retrofitted for the 21st Century Limited was 614 itself for a promotional photo. Even though the Millennium Machine was never built due to simply being unviable for the proposed excursion, HO and G scale models of what this engine would have looked like do exist as promotional material, with one G scale model even surfacing on eBay recently, as its massive and unorthodox design would have been one of the most unusual and possibly iconic locomotives at the turn of the 21st century, if not the history of American railroading. So with all that said, I would like to thank the Fort Wayne Historic Society for not only restoring NYC Mowhawk number 3001, but for also reminding me to finally talk about one of the greatest examples of an unbuilt engine class from General Electric. Also, shout out to the cancelled AC6800CW and AC7100CW, since someone pointed out those classes just before the episode premiered, but I wasn't sure if a prototype of them existed or not, so I might as well include them here too.